You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome on into Toronto Sports Rush. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks, and today I'm very pleased to be joined by someone who is extremely well known in the hockey world, whether you follow NHL or junior hockey, whatever it is. TSN hockey analyst Craig Berube. So pleased to have you join us here on Toronto Sports Rush. And as we mentioned prior to us just starting to record, we talk all about the Toronto Maple Leafs because it is the center of the universe, although we know you are in Vancouver right now. And if anyone is watching, Craig has an incredible view behind him. So if you're looking to check out Canada at any point, Vancouver is a good spot. But great to see you. And thanks so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to join you, Julie. And of course, the Leafs. Now, a lot of people know this, a lot of people don't know this, but my mother was Punch Imlach's secretary, and she was there for the 62 and 63 Stanley Cups. So, there is the family history with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And, she talks very fondly of her days with Punch and King.
Wow. So did they have Stanley Cup rings back then?
No ring. I think she has a little small pendant, and I don't even know I don't even know if it says Stanley Cup on it. It was a pendant that she got for winning it. But I think it's I was with Dallas in '99 when we won the Stanley Cup, and it's such a thrill to do something and be part of that. And my ring's in a safe deposit box, and I'm just not. I don't wear when I go to when we have reunions in Dallas or any type of Dallas Stars functions. I wear it, but other than that, I don't wear it. And you see the rings now; they're bigger and bigger and bigger. I think you're gonna have somebody carry it under their arm soon.
Yeah, especially some of those Super Bowl rings. But is there a reason why you don't wear it?
I'm just not a jewelry guy. I just and even back then, even almost 30 years ago, it's still quite large. And, it's just one of those things that it's more the memories. It really is. And so I think that when you go back in time and you think about, and I know my mother has some beautiful pictures and whatnot from her time there. And it's what you remember of being with everybody that was part of it that makes it special.
Right. I think you have to have a certain type of personality to wear a championship ring on the regular. I know I would. I have that personality. I would love to sport that bling, and maybe someday I will. But until that, I'll continue talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs on Toronto Sports Rush. And so, Craig, we know that Leafs are 6-3-1 in their last 10. Things have been, I don't know. Let me... I'm just the sound of the Leafs right now. How would you describe where they are?
I think the sound speaks volumes, Julie. Because that's kind of like where the fan base finds itself. And one of the things that happens, and I don't know if it happens in what I call the darker days of winter. In January you come out of the new year, and players and teams are trying to just get through it. But it feels that coming out of this Four Nations face-off break, you need to be. I've always felt that there was a rejuvenation, whether it be the Olympic break or, in recent years they've had a break. There's a malaise with the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. And they're talented enough, they're good enough to 6-3-1, and how many teams would love to have that record over their past 10 games? Lots. But when your goal is really simply to what I like to use the term is sharpen the saw as you prepare, and finishing in first place in the Atlantic to get yourself prepared for the playoffs. I don't see the Leafs there. I see the Leafs just, and then the word malaise, just not quite sharp enough, and they have to find a way to get their game and their performances a lot tighter, because they're just not tight enough or good enough to beat good teams.
Where do you think maybe their biggest issues with that malaise and with being not tight enough sort of stem from?
Well, I think a part of it is defense. I know that, Brad Treliving goes out and he acquires Brandon Carlo at the trade deadline. He signs Chris Tanev last year, and people, and we all talk about defense. Oh, look at how good their blue line. And it is good. I don't think there's any question that it's a good blue line. But defense is not about just the blue liners. Defense is about everybody working together. Coincidentally, I think that Toronto and the Edmonton Oilers have run into exactly the same problem problems. It's a collective defensive, what I would call lack of effort. And then I'm not saying they're not working hard or they're lazy, but the attention to detail, you have to be able to find a way to get to the dangerous spots ahead of your opponent. Because if you don't, you're chasing them, and then they have the advantage. Saturday versus Colorado, Julie, if it wasn't for Stolarz, I think they would have lost that
Yeah.
game 13-4. And I mean, it just felt like it was just Colorado just continuously kept beating them everywhere on the ice. If you want to win, you can't we know you can't get beat on the scoreboard, but the reason you get beat on the scoreboard and the reason you're running into problems is because you're getting beat to space. The other team's being quicker to get to where they need to get to take advantage, and that takes a real effort. That's where you got to really dig in and say, I'm not letting that opponent get to that space ahead of me. I'm making sure I get there, and I think that's a big part of really good, strong defensive play, and a part that Toronto has to get. I would say hone up, because right now it's not good enough.
Right. You mentioned that Saturday game against Colorado, and it just seemed like they had, very little offensive zone time. They were beat in so many different ways, as you mentioned, and the speed was so paramount from the Colorado Avalanche, and even Utah looked very good. They looked fast. So then we see the things that they need to work on. Then if you're Craig Berube, who doesn't seem to be very panicked right now, but what are how would you address a team that doesn't seem to have that axe murderer gene in them right now, when you know that you don't have that many games left in the regular season and you have high expectations of this group?
Yeah, I think you just laid it out perfectly, Julie. Like, I love that. I might use that. I'll give you full attribution, axe murderers DNA. Like, and that's what the playoffs are about. I mean, I'm sure the picture of Sam Bennett and Brad Marchand, scumbags, that he put out yesterday. The playoffs are hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And so when you're Craig Berube, and I agree with you, he is calm, and he's been through a lot in his career, both as a player and as a coach. So there's no reason for him to be panicking. But where there has to be an emphasis is on, like, that game, both those games, and I agree with you about Utah. Both those games is an opportunity to say, like, if I'm Craig Berube, I'm going in, I'm saying, do you think this is playoff winning hockey? Do you think this is what it's going to take to win 16 games in the playoffs? Because that's the goal. The goal is I know 16 is daunting. So the most this group, and when I say the group, I'm talking about the core group. The most they've won in a playoff year is 5 games. That's 11 short of the Stanley Cup. And one of the things that's really concerned me, maybe that's a little exaggerated, but it's concerned me, is in past years in the playoffs, it seemed they couldn't score when it became important.
Mm-hmm.
And their defense was a lot better. It doesn't feel that way right now. It feels like the scoring is there and the defense is really falling off. And if the defense doesn't get up to a level where you can not be vulnerable, you're going to be vulnerable. And I think that Craig has to really, really emphasize that. He's tried to do it over the course of the year, try to help them understand there's going to be different ways to score. And I wonder at times, and I wonder if at times that's created some of the vulnerability that they're learning how to try to score in different ways. It is creating some vulnerability and somewhere where you have to tighten that up. But the defensive play starts in the offensive zone when you have the puck or don't have the puck, right? Holding the puck. Rick Tocchet always talks about, you got to hold the puck. You got to hold the puck. You got to get in there and hold the puck. And that's really good defensive play. And that's how you wear down opponents. And I don't think Toronto's doing enough of holding the puck and making sure that they don't feed in to an opponent's attack.
Right. And when you look at them defensively, and let's look at the decor, we know that Chris Tanev has been out. The injury seems a little bit, obtuse right now as to sort of, we thought he might be returning earlier and it hasn't been that way. But in the general sort of overall view of it, with him out, I mean, how much do we sort of see that he is so pivotal for this Leafs team to be able to be successful, because they haven't been when he hasn't been there?
Yeah, yes. To answer pivotal, that is where Chris. Like, I think there's so many different areas where his presence, let's talk about his presence, helps a team. Whoever he plays with is better by playing with Chris Tanev. What your defensive play extends as a team is better when Chris Tanev is in it. And then those areas, those what I call the micro areas, matching up against other teams' best players, the penalty kill, that commitment to doing whatever it takes and being smart about it, becomes better with Chris Tanev in the lineup. So his absence is significant. And certainly getting Brandon Carlo is going to help. It'll ease some of the pressure on Chris Tanev. But those types of things about just being able to move a puck quickly and not create problems. And, the other night against Colorado, the first goal, I believe it was the first goal of the game. But this is an example of what you can't do. William Nylander has the puck. They get the puck, and he makes a little backhand pass in the defensive zone. 5 seconds later, it's in their net. Like, those are the plays. When I talk about defensive play, it's not always just about blocking shots. It's not just always about making sure that you're ahead of your man. Sometimes it's when you have the puck. It's like, I'm not going to give the puck away. That's why I use the Rick Tocchet term, hold the puck, hold the puck. But Chris Tanev is what I call a vigorous competitor. And defensive play requires vigorous competing. And I think that is something that extends to the team. One other thing that I think Craig Berube has had to deal with, and then I think he continues to work through it, is that this team and the team's key players have played a certain way for a long time. You're trying to break some, and I'm not going to say they're bad habits, but he wants them to have different habits. And I think that's still very much a work in progress.
What do you think are some of those habits, like for people who might not necessarily be on the inside, but like what are the habits that the Leafs may be doing that Craig would want to have different?
Well, they've always been, in the previous years, they were a puck possession team. We're going to hold the puck. We're going to make plays. We're not going to give away the puck. And I'm talking about, and they had gifted players that would hold the puck and make plays. I talk about that play by William Nylander, and that led to the goal. Like, that was something that they were encouraged to do. That was something that said, okay, we're not going to give away the puck. We're going to regroup. We're going to hold the puck in the offensive zone. We're going to make sure that we don't give the puck to the other team. Well, what happens in the playoffs is the good teams just say, you can have the puck over there all you want. And that's where I say Craig is trying to get them to have offense in a different way and create offense. You can't just be a one-trick pony if you're going to win in the playoffs. And Craig came in and he's tried to emphasize with that. And we've seen some good examples of that. More dump-ins, we're going to give up the puck because we have to give it up here. It's not to our benefit to hold the puck. We're going to get it to the net. We're going to drive the puck to the net, hunt what I call hunting rebounds, off of shots. Well, again, you start to see the skilled, and you want your skilled players to make plays. You don't want to take away that from, but you want them to understand that there's a time to do it and there's a time not to do it. And I think that's where they're caught in the middle right now. And you think about the rush chances they give up.
Yeah.
Rush chances are a direct result of not making good decisions with the puck up the ice. And you can't do that. If you go back, and I know in 2019 when the St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup, you go back and watch the tapes of those games. No puck ever came into the middle of the ice by the St. Louis Blues. The puck was always circled back down below the goal line. They established where they could get on a forecheck and then go from there. But if they didn't have a play up above the circles or in the neutral zone, that puck went down low, and then they didn't give their opponent what I would call any oxygen. And I think that's the work that Craig is continually trying to do. And it's a fine line because you don't want to tell Auston Matthews not to make plays. You don't want to tell Mitch Marner not to make plays. William Nylander, they're really good at making plays, but there is a time when the play isn't there. It's like a quarterback that has to throw the ball away, even though he wants to make a completion. Not there. I'm throwing it out of bounds.
And when you talk about that way that they play, it seemed as though they had bought in earlier on this season. Mm-hmm. It seemed like it had worked, it had clicked very quickly. As you mentioned right now, maybe not necessarily something that has stuck with them potentially long term, but that they need to get back to. But you mentioned Auston Matthews, and we know that he had dealt with injury issues this year, but something about Matthews, and correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't necessarily feel as though he's, I don't know, firing on all cylinders at this point.
It does feel like that. And I don't think it just feels like that. It looks like that. Austin, when he has those stretches of play where he can just dominate and take over a game, we haven't seen that as much as we've seen that last year, certainly when he had 69 goals. We just haven't seen that. And he's missed games because of the injury. And that certainly is a factor too. How is the team managing, an ailment? We'll call it an ailment, like in making sure that he doesn't aggravate it and doesn't become absent at important times. But I mean, you look at where he's at, and I mean, he's got about if we just look real quickly, it's a third less goals now at this point, or two-thirds less goals than he's only got a third of the goals he had last year with respect to goal scoring, and I think he's the best goal scorer on the planet. But it's just not there for him this year at that same level. In some ways, it might work a little bit better. I don't think it's about Craig Berube, like saying don't score, don't do it. I think that the ailments, whatever they may be, ailment or ailments, have hurt Austin. But in some ways, it might benefit Austin and the Toronto Maple Leafs by saying, okay, I'm not going to be able to score at the prolific rate I did last year for whatever reason, but I'll do these other things. And I think
Hmm.
that can become influential. I mean, we all know what happened in the Four Nations face-off and, that last winning goal, but I thought Austin was really, really strong in that Four Nations face-off. And defensively, offensively, he could have won that game for the USA three different times in overtime. And I thought he was really strong and really good. And if that's a sign of playoff Austin Matthews, I think that that's real positive for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Right. And I also think it's good for him that he didn't win just because it would have been really tough for all of the Leafs fans. What a weird position to be in. Like the team that you play for is like mostly Canadian fans that are Leafs fans. And then if you were to score on Jordan Binnington when he had so many chances, I thought, it's just better if he doesn't for him and for his NHL career. But looking at the depth scoring and even just the second line, how would you rank the Leafs offense at this point in the season when they are staring down a potential playoff opponent on Thursday when they take on Florida?
Yeah, and I think first place in the Atlantic is so important. I like the fact that, Scott Lawton joined the team. I think he's a really good, fits the third center hole really nicely. I think it eases some of the pressure on John Tavares, who to me is having a fantastic year. Just a fantastic year. Nyes has been out, McMahon has been out, but I like the size they have on the wall. Like, you have Nyes that can balance out Marner. Yeah, you have McMahon, and if he's playing on that second line with Tavares, he can balance out Nylander. So you start to look. I don't think Holmberg's a good fit on that second line. I think he's more of a third
Hmm.
line player. Max Domi feels right now like a little bit of a okay. Where does he fit? So, like he's a piece of the puzzle, but what exactly? Where does he exactly fit in the puzzle? But Lawton, getting Calle Yarncroc back, a third line player. I think that they have enough behind those, let's call it the top four forwards, that can alleviate some of the pressure. Nick Robertson's helped out a little bit. We know that Nyes can score by McMahon. I think that this is ultimately going to help the Toronto Maple Leafs when it becomes a lot more serious, and that's when the playoffs begin.
All right, so let's take a look at that game on Thursday against Florida. And the fact you mentioned first place in the Atlantic is very important because also, say if you were to come second and if Tampa's third, then you're kind of screwed anyway, possible. You just have to be really good at this point. But when you take a look at how Florida is right now versus where the Leafs are right now, where do you think the biggest matchups are, and where do you think maybe either team has an advantage?
Yeah, well, I think that right now, I mean, like as well as Stolars has played, I think if you're putting the tail of the tape, shall we call it, edge to Bobrovsky in the net. I think defensively, I think with the addition of Brandon Carlo, we'll assume that Taneff's going to come back. I mean, Aaron Ekblad is suspended; he'll miss the first two games of the playoffs as well. I think Toronto now gets an edge now on the blue line. I think their depth is really good, and depth on the blue line and good defenders means you don't feel vulnerable against the other team's third line, even their second line. You feel like you can match up in all those regards. We know that Florida plays a hard, in your face style. And that's
Hmm.
how they're going to play. And so that style has clearly gone into Florida's favor. They've been in the Stanley Cup final 2 consecutive seasons, and they've won the Stanley Cup. So when you start to look at where they're at and how they play, I think for Toronto has more high end talent, like with Marner and Matthews and Nylander. But the balance in the Florida Panthers game and the way they play, they're committed to playing that way. I think that's a big thing that Toronto has to be able to do.
Right. Is figuring out their identity as well, being able to lock into that identity that Craig Berube is trying to instill and sort of have be consistent, which, as you mentioned, Florida has done so well. I'm here in New York City, watched them last year, and it was, as we know, that relentless team defense, the four lines, just incredible. They do also play, Ottawa on Saturday, and
Mhm.
that's just a now this Ottawa team has been become very interesting. In what way do you think? Where is Ottawa most deadly in terms of for the Leafs?
I think that led by Brady Kachuk, they've adopted that attitude that we're coming after you. And I mean, that game last Saturday versus the New York Rangers, I mean, it was unbelievable what the Senators did. I mean, Allmark was great against Detroit, and he steals a game. But this game against New York Rangers, Friday, Josh Norris gets traded. One of Brady Kachuk's closest friends. I thought Mark Messier nailed it on Saturday on the ESPN panel. He said, "This is what leadership is about." He goes, "You have great friends." He goes, "But when they leave, you're committed now to the team. You're committed to the players that are going to be playing with you, playing alongside you, that you're looking eye to eye. You got to go out and lead." And he said Brady did exactly that. And I think that Brady now, from the Four Nations face-off, you talk about, maybe Auston not winning would be positive. I think that it's made Brady that much hungrier because he knows how close it is. He also knows how hard it is to win.
Yes, certainly, and he definitely put his mark on the game, and in terms of a lot of people's minds and on other players too. Okay, so Craig, we'll let you go in a second, but let's take a look, just like overall Leafs right now, however many games they have left, less than 10, or excuse me, less than 20, fewer. Let me get this grammatically correct. They have fewer than 20 left. What grade would you give them at this point in the season?
I would give them a solid B plus. I would. I don't think they're an A team. The defense has slipped a little bit. The goaltending, I think, has been top notch. That would get an A. The defensive play, I would give it a B, maybe even a B minus. But overall, I think they get a B plus. But B plus doesn't help you win in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
You got to bring, here we go, right? You got to bring your A game. You got to bring your A game, and you cannot rely on your goaltender to just bail you out. There's going to be games when your goaltender. We talked about Stolars and Wall, how they've done that at times. We talked about Allmark on Monday versus the Detroit Red Wings. You can have. It's nice to know you have that in your back pocket, but you cannot be sitting on that and thinking that's our path. They have to get better. They have to get their game up a level. And you mentioned about Florida. They play Florida three more times beginning on Thursday, and I think that's a really good opportunity. Treat it like a playoff game. Treat it like this matters. Treat like if I'm Craig Berube, I'm going to be a bear. I'm going to be a bear on the players heading into Thursday into that game. Like this, like it's playoff. It's a must win game. That type of an ad. We know it isn't, but like be hard, be demanding, and let the players know, like today practice, it's a hard practice. It's not an easy practice. We're not easing into the game on Thursday because you want to make sure, again, I'm going to use the term, you want to sharpen the saw. And the coach has to sharpen the saw, and the players have to sharpen the saw. So to me, and first place matters. I mean, you do not want to
Mm-hmm.
be playing Tampa Bay or Florida in the first round of the playoffs. You just don't. That becomes a series now where you're going to take chunks out of the other team, but they're going to take chunks out of you. And even if you win that series, it becomes a little bit harder as you move on. So first place now, I think, has to be like the goal. Has to be the goal here. It's not about, well, we'll get ready, playoffs come, anybody can win. If that's the way you want to go about it, fine. But that's not the way I'd be going about it.
Well, it's probably good in a way to have that goal because at least it lights a fire underneath you right now before you're sort of just waiting around for playoffs. And also on the idea of sharpening the saw, I think that when they get up in a game, they definitely need to keep that saw very sharp because they seem to not. They seem to kind of forget that they have that saw at some points. But Craig, thank you so much for all of your insight and analysis. It's such a pleasure to be able to have you on Toronto Sports Rush, and we'll have to see how the Leafs do with your grading so far with the playoffs in the horizon, and if they're able to get that first spot in the Atlantic. We wish you the best of luck the rest of the way throughout the regular season and the playoffs.
Thank you, Julie. A pleasure to join you.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.